MXGP The Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first official MXGP podcast with me, Paul Malin, and my co-host this week and forever going forward, Jason Thomas from Fly Racing. And this week, what we're going to do in this first episode is do a quick season review on MXGP and everything that entailed from MX2 to MXGP. Of course, who can forget what happened in Australia just a couple of weekends ago? And if you notice from the backdrop behind me, I am actually at, and we are both actually at, the FIM Monster Energy Motocross of Nations at Crawfordsville, Indiana in the USA whilst recording this. So let's crack on then. Jason Thomas, first of all, welcome to you. Fly Racing, of course, a regular visitor to MXGP. You joined me in the booth on numerous occasions, not just this year, but over the course of the last few years. And so you are well-schooled, well-versed in everything MXGP. I know you're an avid follower as well, in between everything else that you do on this side of the pond over the Atlantic. But here we are for the first ever MXGP podcast, and it's a very warm welcome to Crawfordsville, Indiana. How are you feeling, and are you ready for this first podcast?
Yeah, I'm super excited. You know, we've kind of kept this under our cap for a long time, this idea, and working behind the scenes to make this reality. And for me, it feels long overdue. I'm excited to kind of have a weekly recap where we can kind of hash things out and talk about what went on from my perspective, wherever I may be stateside. And of course, you're on site every week. But yeah, I think it's going to be a really cool experience. You know, you think about what went on this entire season. There's a lot to work through in the short amount of time we have, but we're going to definitely give that a shot. But yeah, I think to have you and all of your experience and then have someone who's at all of the other, you know, super motocross races around the world and share those perspectives is going to be pretty unique.
Well, let's crack on then with, let's say, MX2 and how everything kicked off. And, you know, it all began in Argentina right at the start of March. And if I just look at some results here from that first round, of course, Kaiser Wolf came in as a defending champion. He was victorious with the overall victory from Sascha Kunin and Simon Langenfelder. It was a brand new racetrack. Could you have envisaged the start of the season as it was? And first of all, what did you think to the racetrack in Argentina? Because from our side and from, you know, being around the riders, talking to the riders on a regular basis, everybody was very impressed with what they saw. It was wide flowing. Some likened it to a track on the US circuit. Did you spend much time watching it? Were you able to watch the whole round with it being sort of, you know, so early in the season? And what were your thoughts on it all?
Yeah, it's typical for me. I have to kind of go back and watch afterwards. I'm usually on a plane somewhere on Sunday trying to get home. So I either watching on the plane or I'll kind of cap that night and go through it. But, you know, I think the prior version of this round, the track was really fast and some kind of mixed reviews. Everything I heard and saw about this one seemed to be better. It seemed to be an upgrade over the racetrack that had been there for the prior year. So I think all in all, great change, upgrade. And on the rider side, which always, us being former riders, is probably the most important side to me. It seemed like it was a better round than before.
Yeah, it was in Cordoba, so a little bit closer for everybody. As soon as they landed in Buenos Aires, let's say, it was just a short flight over to Cordoba rather than going across and then up to Chile, just close to the Chilean border. But yeah, I think you're right. The old track at sort of Villa Angostura it turned out to sort of be very, very fast. It got a lot harder over the years. Those bumps got a lot quicker and so much more unpredictable, which obviously then puts the riders on edge and things like that. But this one, brand new, and actually it's difficult to kind of explain the facility in its entirety, but somebody pointed out where the street level coming in, they said, see that dirt there, see where those trees are there, and see how they've taken the dirt all the way down. All that was where this level was. So in effect, they created this massive crater in the middle of nowhere on the edge of town. But the elevation that they were able to create, the size of the jumps, and that actual flow and everything that went with it was just fascinating and fantastic. But there was, as we said, some great racing. And in the end, after a bit of a wobbly start with the qualifying and things like that, it was a great Grand Prix for the defending champion, Kaiser Wolf. But then it turned out not to be a successful defense of his World Championship that he won in 2024. There were some rounds, even though he got on the podium the first couple of rounds, there was somewhere he was a little bit inconsistency. And maybe we can just get into that at the moment, because one guy that he wasn't expecting was Simon Langenfelder, of course, Red Bull KTM Factory Racing, to maybe be as strong and as consistent as he was over the first, say, let's see, 6-7 rounds, where Kai de Wolf, Argentina, and Spain, where it was muddy. He was first and second. Langenfelder third, fourth. There was Liam Everts in there, got on the top step of the podium at a muddy race in Spain. But there was Andrea Adamo started to sneak into the championship fray. 3 podiums in a row at Saint-Jean-d'Angely, round 3. Sardinia in the sand, round 4. And then his first Grand Prix victory in Trentino, round 5. So the start of the season was very, very open. A little bit up and down for the defending champion, even though he was making podiums. But just the consistency that we saw from him last year was just sort of lacking a little bit in the early stages.
Yeah, I think the opening of the season was tricky because it led you to believe we would see the same thing that we saw in 2024. Kai comes out super strong. Simon's in there, but really not breaking through. You know, we had the absence of Lucas Kunin in MX2, which really loomed large as far as like a vacancy there. And I'm just telling you, Paul, I would have handed the championship trophy to Kai early in the season. Like, okay, we already know where this is going because we saw what happened last year. And then really it's very strange. I don't know if it was kind of like a sophomore slump coming off the championship or maybe just a lack of focus, but it seemed like Kai, he just could not find the same rhythm and consistency that he had a year ago. And that's what winning championships is all about, right? You have to manage your bad days. And then when it's a good day, you have to kind of make up all the points and win the round. Very strange season for Kai. And it wasn't like he didn't have a chance at the end. It came down to that final moto in Australia. But I have to say, I was very surprised at just the inconsistency and the way that Kai didn't grasp this opportunity, because I feel like the championship was there for his taking had he executed.
And actually, let's just be a little bit more specific on that inconsistency. It's the qualifying, the Saturdays that seemed to catch him out a little bit, because Argentina, he was third. He was fifth in Kozar. He didn't finish because he had a technical problem in France. So that was 29th. And Simon Langenfelder, he was second. Thibaut Beneston, who was kind of in there and thereabouts early on in the season, he was the qualifying race winner that day. And then you go to Sardinia, where Langenfelder was first in the qualifying race against Kai de Wolf, who obviously had his issues and finished sixth. So, I mean, when you look at we'll do the whole championship points thing at the end of this MX2 sort of brief, if you like. But it was the qualifying races that were really letting him down, because in the race itself, Kai de Wolf, in the early part of the season, his lowest score was a 6 in race 1 in France at Saint-Jean-d'Angely. Before that, he'd been a first and a fifth. He'd got a third and a second. He followed up France in Italy with a double race win. And it wasn't until really France at Ernay, 14-12, where he fell. And that's where we thought he maybe damaged his shoulder, but it was his ankle that turned out to be the problem. And then that kind of compounded itself as the season went on.
Yeah. And again, it just felt like early Kai was going to run away with this thing. And then all of a sudden I was watching and I'm like, there's a chance he's not going to be champion here. And I still hadn't resigned myself to that being a reality until, I don't know, maybe the midpoint of the season, because I just kept thinking, well, Kai's going to figure it out and Simon's going to have issues, because that's what we've always seen. We've always seen Simon kind of stumble in the moment, not be able to take advantage of what's in front of him. And especially like last year, Kai was really able to step up in those opportunities. So again, very misleading, I think, beginning. And then you just start to see things change. And once they changed, it really kind of remained constant through the end of the championship. Like once Simon grabbed hold of it and Kai started to falter a little bit, that status quo, and you have to throw Adamo in there as well, that status quo stayed very constant through the last, 7 or 8 rounds or so.
We had Davide Di Carli on our studio show at the final round in Australia, because obviously by then we knew that the championship was going down to Langenfelder and Kai de Wolf. They were, 20 points apart, something like that, 15, 16 points apart. And I asked him, do you feel that where things changed for Simon Langenfelder was in Switzerland, round 6, where he bagged his first double race win of the season, because then he followed up again in France 3 or 4 rounds later with another 1-1, and then Great Britain, another 1-1, a track that he got his first MX2 Grand Prix victory. And he said, yeah, possibly that, but that wasn't the only time. And then when you speak to people on the Husqvarna side, they were also saying that, by the time we got to the end of the championship, Kai de Wolf, the championship wasn't lost at that final round. We'll talk more about that, obviously. It wasn't lost at the final round. It was all those other rounds in between that. So when we got to France, when he picked up that ankle injury around at Ernay, sort of round 9 in France, that whole weekend, once he had that fall, I think it was in time practice, 14-12 that weekend, a 7th in race 1 in Germany, an 8th in race 1 in Latvia, a 7th and an 8th, Matterley Basin. At that point then, he's 70 points, around 70 points down on Simon Langenfelder at the top of the championship. And so Langenfelder, at the same time, is gaining momentum, gaining ground, and starting to take control, which the old Simon Langenfelder, where he was third the last 3 years leading into 2025, there was always a little wobble. If it was hot, he was made of chocolate and would melt in the heat, little things like that. And so the way that he's been able to grow as a rider, mature, develop, and believe in himself, I think, is maybe where we need to go with that. Absolutely massive for him. Didn't ever look flustered. Even when he didn't make bad starts, he was like, okay, let's not rush this on the first lap, because as the saying goes, you can always lose a race or a championship on the first lap. You can never win it. And so his methodical way of going about things really did pay dividends as the championship got past the halfway stage and towards the sort of final third, if you like.
Yeah, and I've talked to riders who've won championships along the way, Chad Reed and Carmichael, what have you. They very much always say the same thing, is in their championship years, it just seemed like things went their way at the right time. And they really didn't have control over things. They would do the best job they could. They would win when they could, but things went their way at really critical junctures. And I love what you said there about Simon believing in himself, because I think it took a long time for him to get over the hump of believing, hey, I can actually do this, because he's had 3 years in a row where, I guess I'm just not going to win it this year. It's not going to go my way. Kai was basically instilling that belief. Every time Kai had a difficult weekend, Simon believed a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. When the points got out to that huge number, 60, 70 plus, Simon basically got to the resolution of, if I don't blow it, if I just hang in there, I'm going to become world champion. So I would say it's twofold. It's one, Simon needing to believe in himself, and two, Kai allowed that to happen. Kai opened the door for that belief to take hold. And that's really what we saw down the stretch, because there were pivotal moments. You think about that race in Czech, that was a big one where Simon had to step up. He had to get the points lead back higher again, because we knew we were going to Arnhem. We knew we were going to Lommel the following weekend, and those were going to be really strong for Kai to bring points down. And Kai did the job. He did what he was supposed to do in those moments. But there were other moments where Simon's like, if I don't do it this weekend, if I don't step up and perform on these hard packed tracks, where it's at least equal footing between myself and Kai, I really have no chance, because I know I'm going to give points back to him in these Dutch sand rounds. So it was a lot of yo-yo back and forth. Every time Kai would pull points in, Simon had to respond and take the points back out. And to his credit, he stepped up and he got the job done in those moments. And maybe it wasn't a triple win weekend, but he would either keep the points constant or he would at least extend them back out his direction, giving him some rope to deal with when they got in the sand.
Well, I think I mentioned it a couple of times in commentary during some of those races where he showed great tenacity in terms of, if you back him into a corner far enough, i.e. when he falls and makes a mistake and loses those points and realizes that gap, or senses that gap comes back down in favor of Kai de Wolf, all of a sudden he's like, I'm going to the second race. No expression on his face, just that cool, calm demeanor. And then he would come out fighting. He'd grab a foxhole shot. He would then all of a sudden, go and win the race and pull back, not just a race win and 25 points, but Kai then would lose the points that he gained in that first race. And so how much of that is down to Davide Carli and that whole Red Bull KTM effort? Because, for Simon Langenfelder, as we know, it's obviously going for his first World Championship this year. But that team with Jorge Prado, all of his MX2 World titles and MXGP titles. So 4 there, the 9 with Tony Cairoli. You know what I mean? The history of being involved at the very top, going for championships, they know what to say at the right time to their rider in that position. And in the past, it seems you could have said what you wanted to try and calm the nerves of Simon Langenfelder, but maybe there was just a wobble or there was that lack of belief. But this year, the team, Simon, everybody around him just had that belief, and they were able to just almost control, alt, delete whatever happened in the previous race and go, reset, let's go again, like 10-second Tom, as we referred to in, with Sasha Kunin in Lommel. It was almost the same. You could apply the same thing to Simon Langenfelder in the fact that, what happened in race 1 happened, deal with it. This is race 2, a brand new opportunity.
Yeah, and I do give a lot of credit to DeCarli, the family, the team. They've done so much winning that they know what it looks like. They know how the ebbs and flows are going to come and go. But I will still give more credit even to Simon, because as you know, Paul, you can have everybody telling you the right things and in your corner and in your ear. But when the gate drops, you have to execute and you have to believe and you have to go out there. All your worst fears are running through your mind. Like, that's typical for a racer. The worst case scenarios, I'm going to buckle under the pressure. It's not going to happen again. I'm going to lose this championship lead. And he has to have the mental fortitude to fight back against all of those voices in his head and execute and go win in the moment. And think about the chaos that was the final GP in Australia. Rain, mud, getting taken out multiple times, crashing on his own multiple times. There was every possible scenario for him to lose the championship. And in the end, he somehow found a way to get it done after crashing how many times. Those are how championships are won. Like, you have to be able to quiet all of the noise around you. And he didn't win the race. He wasn't even in contention to win the race, but he did enough in those critical moments. And we talked about him. There were so many times where you could feel it. It was palpable how important a particular GP was to maintain the momentum he has and push back against Kai, because Kai was coming. You could feel it. Leaving Lommel, you could feel Kai de Wolf coming on. He just like, okay, here I come. We got to go to Sweden and we're coming back to Arnhem and I'm going to get even more points. Simon really had to push back hard against that, both on the track and in his own mind, to quiet that and be able to perform. And again, it wasn't a huge, he didn't hold the 40-point lead that he had leaving Lockett, but he did enough. In the end, he did enough.
Well, heading into China, the last 7 Grand Prix had been won either by Simon Langenfelder or Kai de Wolf, and they literally flip-flopped. So from Great Britain right the way through to Turkey. So it was in this order: Langenfelder, de Wolf, GB Finland. And obviously Finland was one of those perfect weekends for Kai de Wolf, where he pulled some of those points back, where Langenfelder was only 5th overall. You go to Czech Republic, Langenfelder back on top, 5th overall for de Wolf. So again, backing him into the corner, and then 1-5 again, this time de Wolf. So the results were uncanny in terms of they were both going 1-5-5-1 over a period of 3-4 races. But by the time that we got to Australia, let's talk about Australia. The gap between Kai de Wolf and Simon Langenfelder was 25 points. Okay, it was 20 points. So it was 16 points. But when you look at the qualifying races, Simon Langenfelder was on 135. Kai de Wolf had only scored 115. And we had Rasmus Jorgensen on the studio show as well in Australia. And this is probably 30, 40 minutes before they're going out for their time practice session. And we questioned that, has that been Kai de Wolf's weakness this year? What happened on the Saturday? Because when you break it down, it's only 1 point sort of increments from 10 points for the quali win, 9, 8, 7, down to 10th where you pick up 1 point. But when you add it up at the end of the season and you're going in 16 points down and you've lost 20 points over the season, over the first 19 rounds, just from qualifying alone, it shows the inconsistency and the consistency of the two riders that were going for that championship. Would you agree?
Yeah. And you look, and there's always going to be those nuances where you look back and, okay, how did this championship get won? And every championship is constructed a little bit differently. Certainly this particular year, the qualifying races really stood out, but that's what, World Championship racing is in 2025. You have to perform all weekend long. The days of Saturday doesn't really matter. It's just for gate pick. Who cares? That's long gone. So you have to be on your A game every single time. And yes, it is less punitive than having a really rough Sunday. But I think this championship will go down as an example of how important Saturdays really are.
Yeah. And when you look at, let's wrap up the MX2 right now. Pole positions, Andrea Adamo. So he going for the final round. 4 poles from him. So Thibaut Beneston, and Andrea Adamo, both 4 qualifying race wins apiece. But Kai de Wolf had 1 more than Simon Langenfelder. Laps led, Langenfelder 191, Kai de Wolf only 130. Big telltale there as well in terms of Langenfelder getting used to leading and winning more races as well. MX2 heat wins, Kai de Wolf 2 more than Simon Langenfelder with 12, Langenfelder with 10. Grand Prix victories, de Wolf had 7, Langenfelder had 6. So we're talking infinite details, minute details. Grand Prix podiums, Kai de Wolf 15, Adamo 12, Langenfelder 12. But the red plates, Simon Langenfelder, when you count Saturday with the points added to your championship after the qualifying, and Sunday, 22 over the season for the German. And when he took that championship lead back in Latvia, he never never looked back, and he held the red plate right the way to the end of the season. And what a final showdown it was. We just touched on it a moment ago. And before we came on air to do this podcast, we were talking about the fact that Kai de Wolf obviously had one thing on his mind, to try and rattle Simon Langenfelder, but Langenfelder stayed calm through the first race. There was that one incident, about 2/3 away through the race, when Kai nudged him aside, a little bit of gamesmanship, found out how big the elbows are of a Wolfman. What did you think to that? I mean, some will say it's 50-50. Some will err on the side of Kai de Wolf. Some will err on the side of Simon Langenfelder. Obviously, we weren't in that situation. Both riders are going for a championship. We know what's at stake there. 2 in a row for Kai de Wolf. The first ever for Simon Langenfelder. And we're talking bonuses and things like that. And of course, the accolade is the biggest thing of being world champion. I think I called it during the live with BT, with Ben Townley. There was no way that he looked close enough to make the move there, Kai de Wolf, when he did. But all of a sudden he was alongside, if not maybe a wheel ahead. But it just seemed to check up, almost like a professional foul, if in football terms or soccer terms or whatever. But whatever it did, it worked. Yes, he folded him in half. And at that point, you think, actually, could have ended in injury with a collarbone very, very easily and things like that. And the championship is done and dusted right there. But fortunately, he was able to pick himself up, Simon Langenfelder, rejoin the race and do enough to sort of keep that points gap in check going into race 2.
Yeah, it was, well, first I just wanted to mention when you said the laps led, to me, that really stands out. And when I think about what does that mean? Why did it go that way? I think it really comes down to Simon just put himself in better position. You think about the starts, the races that Kai won, he typically was coming from mid-pack anyway, sometimes inside the top 10, but he didn't get to the lead until maybe the second half of the race. Where you think about those races that Simon won, he would get the whole shot and basically be uncontested most of the time. So it was consistently Simon putting himself in position to succeed that really shows up in the stat there. It was just an easier championship for Simon to manage from the front than Kai having to work through the pack every time. And surely that's due to size. You think about the size of Kai. It's just a really difficult setup for him to get good starts against the likes of Simon and Sasha and Adama, all these super flyweight riders on rocket ships, right? And it's a tough thing to get a good start. But that Australia race was crazy, right? We got a taste of that in Las Vegas with all the craziness that we had as well. You can't fault Kai for doing whatever it takes to try to win a championship. Maybe the second one where he kind of comes to a full stop on the racetrack for me was a little bit too much, a little bit over the line. But like a lot of it was just aggressive racing, and I get it. Big money on the line, world championship on the line. You can't just say, well, I'm not going to try anything. I'm just going to let this thing unfold. I'm sure there were some hard feelings. I'm sure Simon wasn't thrilled with the way Kai kind of went about it. And I don't think Kai necessarily wants to make that his calling card as a racer either. But when you don't get many opportunities to win championships, and Kai's likely moving up is what I hear to MXGP for 2026. So this was kind of his last shot to be a 2-time MX2 world champ. And to his credit, he definitely took every opportunity to try to make it happen in the end.
And when we talk about that 70-point gap that he was down after Matterley Basin around about the halfway stage, to even claw that back and be in contention going into the final race, the final moto of the season in Australia, there's massive respect due there to Kai de Wolf. He was world champion last year. He managed that championship perfectly in the same way that Simon Langenfelder has managed his championship campaign this year in 2025. And so, was Simon the fastest rider of the year? Was he the best? Who knows? But he was the one that got the job done. He scored the most points. And as we said before, and talking to people after the event in Australia, Kai didn't lose the championship in race 2. He lost it earlier on in the year when he fell 70 points back and was always having to play catch up. And so, yeah, credit where it's due to pull that back, to get himself back into contention. But it wasn't about one round. It was about the season as a whole. How much did that ankle injury where he wasn't on the bike during during the training sessions during the week and just having to show up, how much did that affect him? Well, quite a lot, it would appear, because once he was back on the bike, he was able to sort of go back to work and start chipping away. How much of that was Simon Langenfelder just saying, I have points in hand and we can just manage that situation? Maybe quite a lot. But what about for you guys? Fly racing, a first world champion. How does that feel? Because, of course, Cooper Webb getting the Supercross title this year as well in America. 2 big championships, 2 big days, 2 big sort of years for fly racing. What does it mean to a brand that has been there sort of in the shadows maybe for quite a few years, but all of a sudden you're now considered a main player?
Yeah, it was incredible. The culmination of both. You mentioned Cooper Webb winning that 450 Supercross championship, and then I've been working on this, Red Bull KTM Factory Racing DeCarli team for a very long time. My first approach to them to try to get this deal done was back when Tony Cairoli and Jorge Prado were teammates, 2017, 2018 era, trying to get them on board because I just liked what they were about. I liked the family atmosphere. Of course, I loved the winning that they just seem to do every single year over and over and over. So I had been attempting to get them under contract for a very long time. The opportunity came in 2024. And to be completely transparent, we signed them. We got this deal done, not knowing at all who the riders were going to be. There was so much influx between Nissan Husqvarna, Red Bull KTM Factory Racing, the DeCarli team. No one knew who was going where. We certainly didn't know that Lucas Kunin was going to be on a 450. We didn't know that both of them were coming over from the Husqvarna. We had no idea any of these things were happening. I just believed, and I say I because this was a deal that I really worked hard to put together. Of course, I had the backing of Fly Racing and Anthony and Dalton and our sports marketing team that believed in me because I believed so much in them. And this was really more about Davide and Claudio and Miko and everybody associated with that team. I knew that they would get the job done somehow, some way. And I didn't know they would go win a world championship this year. I didn't even care. I just knew long-term, this was the right partnership. So to watch that come to fruition, to watch Lucas and Sasha have so much success, and we'll of course talk about Lucas and the MXGP side, this was a dream come true. And we were happy to support it, happy to be along for the ride. And we're thousands of miles away most of the time watching this. And it was truly a great moment for Fly Racing, let alone all the success that their team had as well.
Well, like I say, you weren't sure whether you would get a world champion this year, but you knew you'd be in the hunt with a lot of podiums. And podiums is TV airtime because there's a lot of close-ups and things like that. But no, congratulations to everybody at Fly Racing for what has been an outstanding season on both sides of the Atlantic, in MX2 and, of course, in 450 and Supercross, with Cooper and Simon Langenfelder.
Yeah, it was a banner year. I'm hoping for many more. I mean, it was completely unexpected. You don't sign these guys saying, yep, we're going to win a title next year. You just sign them because of who they are, what the team is capable of, what they represent, and you're trying to partner with people that exemplify what you want to do in the future and the brand that you are and want to become. Winning just is a kind of a byproduct of that. Like, we're very fortunate, but it was more about the people and the team involved that we wanted to be partners with than anything else.
Well, let's move on to MXGP. Of course, a couple of big talking points. We know Romain Febvre was the eventual world champion for his second time in his career. The first was 10 years ago in 2015 in the Premier class. So a long time between world championship celebratory drinks, let's say. But at the start of the year, Tim Geiser was the man on form, wasn't he? 5 podiums from the first 5 rounds, which was third in Argentina, back-to-back wins in a muddy Spain and Saint-Jean-d'Angely in France. He was third again in Sardinia before he bounced back with the win at his home GP, if you like, Trentino, just over the border from Slovenia. And whilst Romain Febvre had 4 podiums from the first 5 rounds, Glenn Koldenoff had 3 podiums from the first 5 rounds. Of course, we had Jeffrey Hurlings, who was missing for the first 3 Grand Prix. So we didn't really know how this championship was going to shape up until Switzerland, when Tim Geiser went out with that shoulder injury, when everything started to tighten up, and when we knew Geiser was going to be out for a considerable amount of time with surgery, then that's when everybody else was given a sort of shoe-in. The door was now gone from being ajar to being blown open. Everybody believed they would win the championship. And really, it was 2 riders eventually that sort of stepped up, and that was Romain Febvre and Lucas Kunin. And what a fantastic battle that was between the Kawasaki Racing Team rider and, of course, the DeCarli KTM newcomer to the class, Lucas Kunin. What were your thoughts on how that season played out between those two? Going back to the World Championship, so when Tim Geiser went out, what we soon found out was the door that was maybe ajar where everybody thought they might have a chance of winning the championship was all of a sudden blown off its hinges, because with no Geiser, everybody suddenly believed they would be in the shot for a world championship battle. And with that, there were 2 riders that really stood out head and shoulders above everybody else, and that was Romain Febvre and Lucas Kunin. What did you make to their season-long battle once Lucas Kunin seemed to be 100% fit? Because there was a lot of speculation and a lot of denying a double wrist fracture at the start of the year for the young Belgian, and once it was clear that he was 100% fit, all of a sudden, I mean, before we saw that he had the speed, but his consistency, his rapid pace, his youthful sort of exuberance on a motorcycle was plain for all to see. And even Romain Febvre, the eventual champion, couldn't switch off, couldn't relax for 1 minute, could he?
Yeah, this was a wild MXGP championship because there's no one that follows this racing closely that would have watched the first few rounds and didn't think that Tim Geiser would be MXGP World Champion in 2025. It was impossible to not think that looking at his performance. Jeffrey Hurlings isn't there. Jorge Prado departed to America. Like, the door was wide open, and Jorge Prado was seizing the opportunity. Tim Geiser was seizing the opportunity every single angle. So
yeah, 6 race wins from his first sort of 5 GPs.
Yeah, I kind of already had resigned myself to the fact that this was going to be that kind of season. And then everything, and I mean everything, flipped on its head, including Tim in Switzerland. And then you're just like, okay, now what? Because we weren't sure if he would be able to come back or not. I just watching the injury, I was like, that looks like a season-ending injury, just from face value, right? And you don't want to say that, but it seemed like that and ended up being that kind of deal. But Lucas really, I thought, emerged out of nowhere. And that, I didn't even know, we're heavily involved with the team. I didn't know the extent of his injuries at the opening round. I knew he was hurt. You hear the rumors, but they didn't come out and tell us like, hey, he's got broken wrists or arms here. Just bear with us. Like, they just said,
even to you as a sponsor.
100%. They were really trying to downplay everything, and he didn't ever really say. You could see him kind of like everything was taped up. You knew something was going on.
Yeah. And wrist braces on both hands, which he never rode with previously.
Yep. And you just see you see the celebration after the race. All the signs were there that he was significantly injured. But man, I have to say, I did not expect this from Lucas Koenen. And if you told me that Febvre really took advantage of this, Geiser goes out, Prado's not there, Hurlings isn't there, and Febvre steps up, sure, that makes a lot of sense, even if it's 10 years removed from his last championship. But Lucas Koenen at 18 years old to go out and start winning GPs, remove all the crashing that we've seen him do in the course of his career, he becomes incredibly consistent. His starts really are the best in the class, and he's just winning GP after GP. Like, that for me was a shock. So I think we have seen the emergence of Lucas Koenen for the long term as an MXGP World Championship contender. And then it was just kind of a renaissance year for Febvre. And thankfully, I think there's probably a lot of people behind the scenes that are very thankful that both of those two stayed healthy and performed to the level they did, because they gave us a fantastic championship in what could have been a really kind of a boring one. Like, all the stars were injured. Some left, some were injured, some started the season, got injured anyway. And those two gave us a series that we kind of didn't care. We weren't thinking about who wasn't around. All we were thinking about is these two are going at it. One of the youngest riders in the class, and maybe the oldest rider in the class, are now going head to head for, the MXGP World Championship. It was such an unlikely setup, but man, was it entertaining.
Well, towards the end of the season, I was asking, our guests on the studio show, I think we asked Ben Watson, we asked Jeffrey Hurlings, in terms of the championship, who has it? Is it going to be Roman? Is it going to be Lucas? And why you think it will be one or the other? And both Ben Watson and Jeffrey Hurlings said Romain Febvre, just because of the experience of going the distance, being in that position over the years. And when you think of after Belgium Lommel, when, you were there, fantastic Grand Prix victory for Lucas Koenen, going 2-1 to Romain Febvre's 1-2, winning the overall Grand Prix. Coming away from there, 9 points down in the championship chase. There were 2 rounds that really stood out after that. Sweden, a week or so later, where Koenen, his performance, or lack of performance, and we still don't know really why, a 7th and a 12th to Romain Febvre's 1-1-1, because he won the qualifying race, go from 9 points behind to 41 points down. And then you've got 4 rounds to go, the Netherlands, Turkey, China, and Australia. Yes, he pulled some points back after the Netherlands and Turkey, but then China was another round where Lucas just had a bit of a wobble, whether it was heat, jet lag, food poisoning, not sure. All of a sudden, the gap was blown out to 47 points. And it's a mountain to climb from that, uphill struggle going into that final round where there are only 60 points left on the table. It needed something absolutely catastrophic to go wrong for Romain Febvre, which really was never really going to happen, was it?
Yeah, and it just felt like the longer that it went on and Lucas kind of couldn't take over, the odds started to lean towards Roman because he's been there and done it. And I really felt that the flyaway rounds, even Sweden, Sweden's a flyaway for kind of most intents and purposes. I felt like those rounds were going to really offer opportunity to Roman because of how many times he's been through that scenario where Lucas is, maybe he's raced the track a couple times, but they're not super familiar to him. These tracks in France and the Netherlands and Belgium, he's raced on those tracks many times. So Roman doesn't really have the edge on him there. He doesn't have this big kind of experience edge that he would at these other rounds. And it's not always about the racetrack. It's being able to manage flights, being able to manage different food, different time zones, being able to perform, not getting sick, all those things that Roman has been through several times. He understands how to manage those situations, and especially in succession. Think about the rounds of Turkey, China, and Australia back to back to back, having to manage the travel, being able, and it's not just about your average traveler where, I will feel a little jet lag today, but I'll go into the office. No, these riders are having to perform at an extremely high level. They have to be their best selves each and every weekend. Probably not sleeping well. How do you find your best self on those weekends on a time like that?
Different beds, different hotels, different food, different time zones. I mean, even for us working in the media side of things, you look at it, and from the UK, we're 1 hour time zone behind Europe. And so when you're based in Europe, you go to Turkey, you go another 1 hour forward, you go to China, I think it was like another 4 or 5 hours in front, and then straight onto Australia, another 2 or 3 hours in front. And then those that are riding the Motocross of Nations, which we'll come to in a moment, to come back to Europe, so to go back another 6 hours, have a few days riding, training, getting back on the program, to then head over the Atlantic back to to where we are now for the Nations in the Ironman. And you're going another 5 or 6 hours back in the opposite direction. So no sooner have you got over the jet lag from going forwards in time, you're coming back, reset it, and then going back, which honestly, from my side, I don't mind, because as you know, being in and out of Europe, when you go backwards in time, you don't really need to sort of set an alarm clock to get up, because if your normal body clock says get up at 7 or 8 o'clock, 6 o'clock, whatever you want, you're getting up at like 2, 3 in the morning without an alarm, and you still feel like you've had fantastic sleep. So coming back this way is maybe not so bad, but all of that 4 races in 5 weeks is definitely going to take its toll on everything. You're not in the same bed, the travel, all the rest of it, the jet lag. It's insane. And I think that's one of the things that people don't see about MXGP is that kind of aspect and that effect that it can have on a championship.
Yeah, and I think next year they're going to take it to a new level. I bet we get the schedule on Friday. You probably know, like typically we get the schedule for next year sometime relatively soon.
It's normally around about this time of year, yeah.
Yeah, I'm expecting to go Turkey, China, Australia, the Moon, and then Motocross of Nations. That'll be the next evolution of this travel schedule.
Well, talking to David Longo, the Nations is going to be on the Moon next year. They found a location up there somewhere. Elon is going to provide us with transportation to get there.
Mars in 2033.
Yeah, a sand race. Red clay. Just one thing we'll touch on before we talk about Motocross of Nations. Romain Febvre. I mean, 33 years old, 14 consecutive podiums. I mean, it sounds impressive, but in 2015, when you look back, he had 13 consecutive podiums, the last 13 rounds on his way to winning the championship a couple of rounds early. So when you win it a couple of rounds early and you win 13 in a row 10 years ago, and you go to the final round and you've been on the podium 16 out of, sort of like the 19 rounds, if you like, and 14 of those were in a row with wins in Sardinia, in Lugo in Spain, at Ernée in France, Mattigny and then in Sweden. The guy that kept him honest all the way was Lucas Koenen, who from round 6 to Belgium, where he was victorious there, was on the podium every week, whether it was a win or a second. Just that slip up where he was 8th overall in Sweden, back on the podium for a couple of Grand Prix in the Netherlands and Turkey, and then a 12th in China. Came away with the win at the final round. Of course, that was just a 1 race deal to decide the overall Grand Prix because of the rain. Let's talk about the rain there for a minute. But the consistency of Romain Febvre had to be there, because if he dropped for a minute, Lucas was going to be right on him.
Yeah, and this was just about pressure. Lucas was fantastic, and when Lucas was on, you saw him win some GPs by 20 seconds, right? There was no one on the track that could touch him, but Roman's consistency put so much pressure on Lucas to not make the critical mistake. In the round like Sweden, that was really unexplainable. I still don't really understand why he was so far off at a race like that, but those rounds where he gave up handfuls of points, you can see where the championship was lost in those moments. It wasn't that he wasn't fast enough. It wasn't that his starts weren't good enough. Maybe you could say Kai in MX2, that was a problem, or the starts. It was really just Roman's consistency and just unrelenting pressure all series long that in the end allowed him to win it with a pretty big margin.
Yeah. And as we did with MX2 a moment ago, I'm just going to go through some of the sort of season stats, if you like. Lucas Kuhn, this is how impressive Lucas Kuhnen was, and you can sort of work out where he fell short. We mentioned Sweden and China, and obviously the start of the season was a bit rough with those injuries going into the season. Lucas Kuhnen, 8 qualifying race wins, 8 poles. Jeffrey Hurlings had 4, Roman Febvre was 3. So the gain there in terms of Lucas Kuhnen's consistency on a Saturday, we'll cover his points in a moment, led Lucas Kuhnen, 268, Roman Febvre, 166. Massive for somebody in their rookie season on a 450. Heat wins, race wins, Lucas Kuhnen 14, Roman Febvre 9, Jeffrey Hurlings was 8, Tim Geiser 6, and they were in the beginning of the year. And then Grand Prix victories was Lucas Kuhnen, who came away with 6 at the final round. So when you think of all of that, Jeffrey Hurlings, Roman Febvre with 5, podiums, Febvre 16, Lucas Kuhnen 13. 3 podiums was all the difference in the end. But the stats, Lucas Kuhnen topping pretty much everything else apart from the gold plate with the most points and podiums. That just goes to show what a phenomenal season it was and how consistent you had to be this year to be crowned MXGP World Champion.
Yeah, and I think it was so important for Roman to win this year. And because I don't know if this opportunity will present itself again. You look at, we don't know what Tim Geiser's future holds. He's going to make this team switch that we keep hearing about.
Allegedly.
Jeffrey Hurling's kind of in the same boat.
Allegedly.
But, yeah, the emergence of the youngsters is a problem. And you're talking about a Roman Febvre that's going to be 34 years old. You've got the established players, plus you've got Kai's probably moving up. You've got Lucas, who's only going to be a year more mature and better. So I don't want to disqualify Roman from the future, but it really felt like he needed to seize this opportunity because it may not present itself again.
All right. Let's talk about the Monster Energy FIM Motocross of Nations. We are here in Ironman Raceway, Crawfordsville, Indiana. And it's the 6th time we've had this event held on US soil. Australia coming in as defending champions with Jet Lawrence, Kyle Webster, Hunter Lawrence, the same team as last year. But the team who finished 2nd overall last year, Team USA, you know a lot more about this than I do, but man, the last 2 weeks has been tough, hasn't it? Eli Tomac, RJ Hampshire, Justin Cooper, now the team, or Tomac, Cooper, Hampshire in that order in terms of MXGP. But the original team that had Sexton as an MXGP rider, Hayden Deegan as an MX2 rider, and then, of course, Tomac in the open class, which was race 1 and 3 or race 2 and 3? Blown apart all of a sudden. No Sexton, having to replace by RJ Hampshire. And then this is Wednesday that we're recording this, literally Tuesday afternoon, the announcement from Hayden Deegan, not going to be lining up, or from Racer X anyway, that's where I saw it, that he wouldn't be taking part, and that Jay Coop, who's now going to be on his 3rd Nations visit for Team USA, on standby and filling in for his star, Monster Energy star Yamaha. Big couple of weeks in terms of how this Nations team for Team USA has played out.
I'm just telling you, on Saturday in Las Vegas, Saturday evening, I really felt bad for AMA's Mike Pelletier because he had this kind of dream team. Like I believe that the USA had the best team that they could assemble on paper on Saturday morning going into Las Vegas. And then Saturday evening, everything had come apart. Everything was unraveled. 2 of the riders were injured. It seemed a bit unlikely at the time that either of them were going to be able to go. Cooper Webb was in the running to race this race. He was on a plane to Hawaii from Las Vegas. It was a lot happening behind the scenes for days on end. Justin Cooper immediately said, yep, I'm in. I'll start practicing on the 250. And in the end, we know that he eventually joined the team. RJ Hampshire was in limbo for the better part of 4 or 5 days. They couldn't decide. At one point, it was going to be an all Yamaha Motocross of Nations team between either the combination of Justin Cooper, Cooper Webb, Hayden Deegan, and Eli Tomac. They were going to piece a team together out of those 4. That didn't end up happening. RJ came back into the fold. And if I tried to tell you how many times I heard a different combination for this team, this would be a 3-hour podcast because it changed by the hour. And, our affiliation with Fly Racing was trying to make sure that whether Cooper Webb or RJ Hampshire had the appropriate product, our heads were about to spin around backwards trying to go with the flow on this stuff. It was just a really challenging situation all around. In the end, I give the AMA a lot of credit. I give Mike Pelletier a lot of credit because he kept a cool head. He allowed the Hayden Deegan situation to play out, run its natural course, allow him to take a chance on the 250, all the while Justin Cooper was still preparing behind the scenes in case it didn't work. And in the end, I think they made the right decision. I think that Justin Cooper is the right choice versus an injured Hayden Deegan, not over a healthy Hayden Deegan. Let's be very clear about that. But an injured Hayden Deegan, to me, is problematic on multiple levels, not just performance. I think if he can go, that's fine. But the risk of further injury or some sort of aggravation throughout the weekend that would immediately disqualify Team USA, that to me was too big of a risk to take. So in the end, I think we have a good team. Is it the best possible team we could come up with? Probably not. But you go with what you have.
And it's a team that already comes with nations experience because, RJ, when he rode in France in 2023, he was the MX2 rider that day on his Husqvarna then as well. Nothing can prepare you for an event of this magnitude. Yeah, you can sell out Supercross stadiums, but that's your bread and butter. You know exactly what to expect. Sometimes the crowd is going to be for you, against you, and you're in different states. So, the atmosphere in the crowd for Supercross is completely different. Then you go outdoors again. You move around from state to state, and you get that general sort of hardcore element of race fans. You go to the nations, and all of a sudden it's like, I remember AP in France as well. He was like, dude, this is wild. Never seen anything like this before. And he'd done a nations in Redbud in 2018. And it was just like a different eye-opening experience for him, and I think for RJ as well. And so to come here now, having got that one under his belt, he's going to know a little bit about, well, he knows everything now about how the format is, the rules and regulations from flagging and, the flag signals and things like that. The format of doing the free practice and the qualifying race in your group. So MXGP riders only, they will be in the first practice. MX2 riders only in the second practice, open class riders, and that will be the same for the racing on Saturday. But then, of course, those mixed races, the combination races on Sunday, which makes this event so unique. The atmosphere, the crowd, everything about it, riding for your country. Jay Coop's been in that situation as well. Assen, it didn't work out for him. Gotten into a crash with Jason Anderson on the opening lap in the qualifying race, I believe, injured his hand. And then, of course, to win it at Redbud in 2022, he's seen both ends of the spectrum. And again, another rider with that experience, of course, Captain America, Eli Tomac. He finally got his victory a couple of years ago on home soil. And so all three of them have experienced nations racing. Mike Pelletier, who's normally your sort of race director with the AMA, obviously stepping up in for Roger DaCosta this weekend for this edition. I wonder how much of what's happened in the last couple of weeks means this is not going to be a permanent fix and only a temporary one. Because why would you put yourself through all of that?
Yeah, it's
with the decision making and everything else.
Yeah. I mean, it's for Roger to step out and then Mike to step in full time and to have to deal with all of that unfolding. I even spoke to him. Again, we're recording this on Wednesday. I spoke to him today, and he said, "I have a team, and we're here." Past that, I don't know what else to tell you. I think it's just everything he could do to be able to just get to that point of we've arrived and we have a team. Kind of says what the last 10 or 12 days have been like for Mike. But I don't dislike the setup. You have experienced riders. All three riders are over the age of 25, 26 years old. So I don't think they're going to be overwhelmed by the moment. All three of them have raced this race at least once, so they understand what this race means. And I'll tell you, this is a big part of it for me. I truly believe that all three of them want to be here. And I've seen it when riders are just kind of going through the motions, not just Team USA. I think, I would say Ken Roxon certain years has kind of been like, I could, I just thinking about the off season already. And you can see that shows up in their riding. I would say Jorge Prado a year ago at Matterway Basin, he had nothing left to give after the World Championship. I think that the Team USA riders want to be here in this moment, which for me that's a really big deal. And it typically shows up in the results column on Sunday as well.
Well, with Eli being now the only existing original member, you have to give 11 out of 10 and full credit to the other two riders, Jay Coop and RJ, for stepping in, even though, as you may have seen in social media and different reports, maybe they weren't stoked or that impressed that they weren't first choice, for whatever class. But to stick around and hang around, because a lot of other riders will be like, no, screw you, I wasn't first choice, find somebody else. And then how far down the list do you go before it gets to a point where you're just sending a team? And of course, the fans see through that. Everybody sees through it. It's not what you want. You need, as you said, JT, you need riders who want to be there, believe that they should be there. And I think, given the situation, maybe the original team of Eli, Chase, and Deegan was the best team that you could put together on paper. But this is a very, very good team. Make no mistake about that.
Yeah, again, is it the best possible potential team? No, but that's very rare. I don't think Team USA has had that in several years, in the last 10 or 15 years, 10 or 15 teams. That has not been the case. So we're going to take these three. I think they're capable. Is it good enough to win? Hey, that's why they dropped the gate on Saturday and Sunday. But these guys, I think they want to be a part of Team USA, and they're happy to be here. And there is no doubt, if you've ever watched RJ Hampshire ride at any point in his life, there's no doubt about effort from that guy. And for me, that goes a long way.
And he's riding that 450 really, really well at the moment as well. So, but also everybody believes they can come in and win this thing, from Australia, the defending champions. I mean, same team as last year. What a great team they've got as well. Maybe they start as the favorites. Who knows? Coming in as a defending champion, same team, has to be the favorite. But everybody believes they can win. But this race, with the ballot for the Saturday qualifying races, and then the gate pick that you get, and of course where you put the lights rider, the 250 rider compared to the 450, where's the advantage on the start? Who do you put as a disadvantage in that scenario, particularly with the 450s as well? An MXGP and an open class rider. Do you put Eli up the inside, or do you put RJ on the up the inside? It's all these variables eventually play out to the point where we get to the final race of the day, which is the one where, and it's not an episode of Friends, but the one where we get to see the winners of the Chamberlain Trophy, which is what they're all riding for, to be world champions.
Yeah, it is. And just two kind of, behind the scenes or kind of inside racing type things. I think this race, you have to have an MX2 rider that can get good starts. So I really think that's kind of a benefit of having Justin Cooper on the team. He's been there and done it. Yes, experience counts, but getting a good start in the MX2 class is critically important. If you are able to use both of your MX2 scores, if they're that good, that is such an advantage, because you're able to kind of eliminate any sort of mishap that may happen throughout the day. And secondarily to that, riders that like to use outside starting gates as their first choice. That is a huge coup for a race like this, because you can give Justin Cooper or Kyle Webster that inside gate, but Hunter Lawrence and Eli Tomac, they like to go outside anyway. If you gave them first gate pick, they're going to go to the middle or outside of their own kind of choice. That is a huge advantage, because then you don't even have to make that decision. You don't have to make a hard choice about, well, we could maybe win the moto overall if we give our best guy that inside gate. They don't want it anyway, so perfect. Give the other rider the inside gate. Let them go choose. It's one of those things that doesn't get talked about. We would say kind of inside baseball, one of those things where the average fan may not notice, but it is a huge part of this race, is getting good starts, even if you have a kind of a 21, 22, 23, 24 gate pick. Yeah. If that's kind of where you would want to go anyway, there's a lot of upside there.
Well, let's just wrap this up then with some of the favorite teams. We've talked briefly about Jet Lawrence, Kyle Webster, Hunter Lawrence, the defending champions. And there's a lot of experience there as well. It's going to be the fourth appearance for Jet, third appearance for Webster, the sixth for Hunter. Of course, they won for the first time for Australia last year, going to be coming in as favorites. The USA, we've spoke about them at length. The Netherlands, Glenn Koldenhoff, Kyle Wolf, and Calvin Verlanderen. No shocks there, are there?
It seems like a miss to not have Jeffrey. I know the decision was made early. I understand his reasoning at the time, but man, I think the other teams are very happy to not have to deal with the 84 with the form he's on.
Yeah. But obviously, I don't know if it's, again, no one's really kind of came out and said why that is and stuff like that. But, they've still got a great team. Calvin Verlanderen, he's won it in the past. So too, Kyle Wolf has been very, very good in the past. Glenn, of course, Mr. MXoN, where he's won quite a few races. But again, 34 years old, no spring chicken. I guess if they go out and win, then the choice will be justified. If they go out and get a podium, which they're capable of, the choice will be justified. But if they do neither of those, and of course, all of those people that are jumping on this bandwagon going, Jeffrey should have gone, why didn't they pick Jeffrey? Whatever else. You're bound to get all of that anyway, just the world that we're living in at the moment. But they obviously have their reasons, and credit and fair play to the KNMV, the Dutch Federation. They haven't buckled to the pressure of saying, you know what, maybe we made a mistake. Actually, Jeffrey's coming good again and whatever. At what point did they make that decision? Was it based on the fact that he was still coming back from injury and there were still some unknowns there? But they've stood their ground and they've basically said, no, this is our team. And that shows belief as well, doesn't it? For everybody else in there, because, for Calvin, he'll believe that he belongs there. Glenn Koldenhoff believes he deserves to be there. Didn't really affect Kai de Wolf because he's their MX2 rider. But that's good leadership in many respects.
Yeah, I think you have to stand behind the team you chose. That those guys can't be looking over their shoulder wondering if they deserve to be there or not. And for me, for the Dutch, it really comes down to, there's two things. Do they bring their best stuff? Because we've seen Calvin, we've seen him not really be in the fight, like just a little bit off, running in the backside of the top 10, not really relevant in the conversation. But we've also seen him in podium contention. So which Calvin do we get this coming weekend? Can Glenn be Mr. Motocross of Nations the way he has been so many times at this event? And then the final thing is, can Kai get good starts? That's a tough ask because he was struggling to get good starts against purely 250s. Now you throw 450s in it. If Kai's in 27th on the first lap, that's a really difficult setup for the Dutch team. So they have some hurdles to overcome here. They can. They're talented enough. They're capable, but they're going to have to execute on every front to get it done.
What about France? Romain Febvre, Mathis Valin, Maxime Renault. Of course, Romain Febvre, a 4-time winner in the past. They were 5th last year, which was a surprise to many, many people. They've got Maxime Renault in there, who's a 5-time team member now coming into this one. And Mathis Valin, of course, the rookie to the team, who's had a solid year in MX2 this year. He just needs to put in one good ride just to have them in contention, doesn't he? And that's how it works.
It's maybe the most questions I've had about a French team in a long time. And that doesn't mean that they can't step up and perform. I just think there's a lot of uncertainty about how this is going to go, because Maxime Renault, if show him early season form, great, that guy can win. Look at 2022 at Redbud. He was unbelievably great. He can do it, but there's been so much inconsistency in between. It's impossible to just say without a doubt he's going to be his best self. Mathis Valin, same kind of thing. Is he fast enough? Yes. He's a great starter. That really helps, but he's never been on this stage. He's never raced this racetrack. There's a lot of unknowns there. It doesn't mean it's a net negative. It's just uncertainty that comes with that team. And then you have the reigning MXGP World Champion, who's kind of a known quantity in Romain Febvre. He's the anchor. He has to show up and put in his best self, because if there's any drop off in the other two, if there's any just sort of, well, Mathis Valin didn't bring his best stuff, you can't really expect too much. Febvre needs to be like 1-2, 2-1 on the day for them to have any chance in that type of scenario.
Then we've got, of course, Germany with Kenny Roczen, the MX2 World Champion, Simon Langenfelder, Max Spies, a newcomer. Maybe a top 5 finish with Kenny and Simon. And what about Tim Geiser in Slovenia, of course? There'll be a fantastic individual performance coming from him, the 5-time world champ, of course. He's got Jakob Pekalai and the all-time king of privateer racing at the moment, Jan Panzer, his 7th appearance. They got a 7th overall last year at Matterley Basin. And what about Tony Cairoli, Andrea Adamo, Andrea Bonacorsi? Cairoli, 40 years young. It's going to be his 16th appearance. He won it in Italy in 2021. There are going to be a lot of individual performers out there, but there's also going to be some strong team performances. But at the end of the day, how do you think it's going to play out? Of course, don't forget Belgium as well, with Lucas and Sasha Kuhn and Liam Everts, a very, very strong team on paper. Is it good enough to make a podium? They've not been on the podium since Assen 2019.
Which is crazy to me. To hear that they have not been on the podium that long is wild historically. But a lot of those teams you named are wild cards. Some of them, the third rider is going to be, they have to come up with a heroic effort, not so different than Markus Schiffer in 2012 for Team Germany. They need that type of one moto ride out of that guy, right? It's Max Spies, or whether it's Peklaj, whoever, they've got to really step up and deliver at least one solid moto. I think Italy's pretty solid. Like, they all have established riders, but what does that equate to at the end of the day? Is that good enough for a 6th? or are in the fight for the podium. And that's going to come down to what level's Tony Cairoli on. You know, is he at the backside of the top 10, or does he get his patented hole shots in his running up front? You know, there's a lot of what ifs amongst all those teams, but the one for me, the dark horse that I don't think many people are thinking about or talking about, is that Belgian team you mentioned. Lucas Koenen could be in the fight to win both of the motos he's in. Sasha Koenen, if he stays upright, could be in the talks to win the MX2 class outright. I don't know what to expect really from Liam Everts. He's going to be on the big bike, but you've got to like his chances in MX Open. He's certainly fast enough. Can he bring his best stuff? So of all those teams you just named, which I kind of put in the wild card category, the one I would be the most worried about if I was racing this race would be the Belgians. I think they have so much upside and not a lot of pressure. They're coming in as, hey, we're going to go shock the world here.
Yeah. Well, look, JT, we are out of time, but the good news is we won't have too long to wait before we do this again, because on Sunday after the 78th edition of the FIM Monster Energy Motocross of Nations, Jason Thomas and I from Fly Racing will be back to unpick what happened here in Ironman Raceway in Indiana. And so, all that remains for us to say is enjoy the race this weekend. If you are in town and you're going to be here on site live watching the event, we've got the big parade going on in the town. So normally we do the parade, the Riders Parade on the start straight. This weekend, it's going to be down in town through the main street, about 500 meters. There's going to be all kinds of stuff going on, not just the riders and the teams, but Monster Energy stunt shows and things like that. So it's going to be big. It's going to be huge. Everybody here in Montgomery County and Crawfordsville really got behind this event, and it's fantastic to see the support that we're getting already, and it's only Wednesday. So from me, Paul Malin, Jason Thomas, Fly Racing, thanks for listening to our first MXGP podcast, which was a season review of MX2 and MXGP, and of course a quick preview of what we can expect for the 78th edition of the Monster Energy FIM Motocross of Nations. We will do it again on Sunday after the race. So hope you've enjoyed this one, and we'll be back with more at the end of the weekend. We'll see you then. Bye for now.
MXGP, the podcast.